Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Savannah, I'm Kaylee, and I make soap. And I thought that you guys would like to come along and see how I make some of the bars. So the first one that I'm making is called Barbershop. It's part of my fall line. It is my first men's bar that I'm making, and it smells amazing. It's exactly like an aftershave. I love it so much. I took a lot of advice from my husband as to how this bar should look, and he really wanted it to stay really nice and clean and simple. So it's just a layered bar. It's got 3 colors and some sea salt on top. So I really love it. I really like the way it came out, and I hope you guys do too. First, I just wanted to show you guys a little bit about what goes into making soap and explain a little bit about it to you. So essentially, when you make a bar of soap in the cold process form, you use oils and a lye water solution. So what I have here is some liquid oils and some hard oils. The only difference is that the hard oils come in a solid state and you have to melt them before mixing them with your liquid oils. So the oils that I use, the liquid ones, are olive oil, castor oil, and sweet almond oil. And then my hard oils are coconut oil and a sustainably sourced palm oil. The other ingredient into making your soap is a lye water solution. So it is sodium hydroxide, or otherwise known as lye, and distilled water. And what happens is when you mix your oils together and then you mix the lye into the oils, it saponifies. So the lye takes the oils and turns it into soap. So that is how you get your bar of soap. So what we're gonna do first is I'm going to go ahead and pour my hard oils into my liquid oils. So once we have that mixed in, I actually pre-mixed my liquid oils and I pre-mixed my lye solution. So they're at room temperature, which is about 76, and I actually just heated up my hard oils. So we're gonna go ahead and see what temperature this is. So that's at about 88, and my lye water is at about 77. So we're 10 degrees apart, which is good. The closer you can get is great, but it's a little bit hard when you're trying to just make soap the day of, because once you mix your lye with your water, it gets really, really hot and it takes a long time for it to cool down. So a good way to do it is to mix it ahead of time. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do now is I'm going to mix my lye water into my oils. And so what will happen when I mix it in is it will slowly start to thicken the soap. So what I'm going to do is, normally when you mix it in, you would use a stick blender if you're just making a plain bar of soap that's one color. But today, since I'm going to be doing it in layers and I want to make sure that my layers don't thicken up too fast, I'm going to just hand mix it with a whisk first, and then I'll be able to split it off into my different colors that I'm going to have, and then from there I can always stick blend each layer if I need to. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lye water solution, and since I did mix my lye water solution ahead of time, it's formed some crystals on top, so I'm just going to go ahead and strain it as I pour it in. And I'm just going to hand mix the lye water into the oils. Just try and get everything to start mixing together. And then I'm going to use my hand whisk to try and get these oils to emulsify with the lye, which basically just means that they don't separate anymore. So it turns out this is actually not emulsifying quick enough, so I'm going to stick blend it just for a second. It can start to thicken and come to trace really, really fast, so I want to make sure that I don't do it too much. So I'm going to put my stick blender in at an angle because I want to make sure that I get as many air bubbles out as possible. I'm going to put it in at an angle, and then I am going to tap it a little bit to try and get some air bubbles out, and then I'm just going to pulse it just a couple times. And basically what I'm looking for is to make sure that there's not any oil still sitting on the top of the soap. So that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to separate this batter into 3 portions so that I can then color them and then pour them into our loaf mold. Okay, so the design that I'm going for is actually going to be 50% gray, and then I'm going to have a blue and a red, each of which will be 25%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take actually my empty container from my hard oils, and I'm going to go ahead and tear my scale out. And since these containers are the same, I will be able to know exactly how much oils I have in here. So I have about 35 ounces of oils. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is measure out what I need for my 25%, and I'll leave the 50% in this. Alright, so now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to color these. So the colors that I'm going to be using is dark navy blue from Nurture Soap, neutral gray from Nurture Soap, and fire cider from Nurture Soap. So I'm going to have the neutral gray be 50% and the other two colors be the 25%. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna start by adding a 1/4 teaspoon of each of these micas into these tubs. I know the colors that I want, but I don't know exactly how much mica it's going to take to get there. So I'm gonna start with a 1/4 teaspoon, and then we'll kind of see where we're at. So this one I'm actually going to add a 1/2 teaspoon since it is a larger amount of oils. Okay, so I think that my reddish brown color looks perfect. I do think that my blue and my gray need a little bit more. I also am going to go ahead and stick blend at least the blue and the gray a little bit before I go ahead and put them in the mold. Just to make sure that this mica is combined all the way. Okay, so I feel pretty good about where my colors are at now. I have this nice rusty red sort of color, a deep navy blue, and a lighter gray. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with putting them into the mold. So like I said, I'm doing a layered design, which means that each layer I put on, I need to make sure that it doesn't break through the next layer. So it's kind of a waiting game a little bit. My first layer I can mix so that it is a little bit thicker so that I can put my second layer on, but then I will have to wait for my second layer to thicken up in the mold so that I can put the last one on top. So before we go ahead and do any of that, we need to put some fragrance oil in. So I am going to be distributing this fragrance oil between all three. I'm using Shave and a Haircut from Brambleberry. This one says that it behaves well in cold process soap, which could mean that I could put it all in right now and mix it up and it should be fine, but because I want to make sure that my layers don't thicken too quickly or anything like that, I am going to be putting it in individually right before I put the layers in. So I'm going to go ahead and put some into my rust color since that'll be my bottom layer, and then we will go ahead and mix that up and pour it into the loaf mold. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hand mix this fragrance oil in just to see where things are at, make sure that it's not accelerating the trace of the soap at all. And then I am going to go ahead, since this is my bottom layer and it doesn't have any soap that it's sitting on top of, I'm going to go ahead and stick blend this a little bit more just to get it a little bit thicker. It'll cut down on some of the time that we would have to wait to put our blue layer on top. Alright, so I've gone ahead and mixed this up. It is a little bit thicker than the rest of the soap. That way it'll cut down on a little bit of the time that we will have to wait. This is our loaf mold that we're going to go ahead and pour this in. So this will be about 1/4 of the mold. The blue will also be about 1/4, and then the gray will fill up the rest of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour this into the bottom of the mold here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wiggle this around, get it to level out a little bit. I am going to tap it down a few times just to try and get any air bubbles out. Alright, and we are going to go ahead and let this layer set. Once it's set enough that I can pour the next layer on, I will go ahead and do that. Okay, so we are back. This one has set up already. It actually only took a couple of minutes. I don't know if you can kind of see, but you can actually see that it's gotten a little bit more matte on top instead of shiny, and obviously it's not moving around. So we're gonna go ahead and pour our next layer in, which is our blue. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the fragrance oil to that, mix it up, and then we'll pour it into the mold. Okay, so when I pour this one in, I am going to actually use my spatula to break the fall a little bit, just to make sure that bottom layer is really set up, but I just want to make sure that it's not going to go through that bottom layer at all. Okay, so we are ready to go. That blue thickened up also in just a couple minutes. So you can kind of see as it sits here, it gets a lot thicker. So this gray is also getting thick. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the fragrance oil into here, and we will pour this on top of the blue. Okay, so I'm gonna let this sit up just a little bit, and then I am going to come in and put a little bit of sea salt on top. That's the only thing we're gonna put on top. We're not gonna put any flower petals or anything like that. It's just a very straightforward bar soap. Okay, so this is nice and set up now. I'm gonna go ahead and add some sea salt to the top. We're gonna be using this extra coarse sea salt from Brambleberry. I got this just because the sea salt that I was able to get not online was just not coarse enough. I really wanted some nice chunky sea salt for this one. Alright, so that is the end of this bar. Hopefully when I cut into it, those layers will be nice and flat and even, and the colors will look great. So I'm really excited to cut into it and show you guys that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you loved the way this bar turns out, and I hope you'll subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. Goodbye.